They didn't just shoot my bull, they shot my father's dying wish. The first shot cracked the morning open like lightning through bone. I froze mid-step. Then came the sound wet rattling alive and ending. My best Highland bull collapsed near the pond, blood soaking the Montana earth his earth, the earth my father begged me to protect. The silence afterward screamed louder than the gun. Then another shot. I sprinted. Scout, my border collie, barked as if mourning. My legs moved before my brain could, and that's when I saw them 3 men with rifles cutting through my herd like hunters at a trophy convention. And behind them, heels, spotless posture regal, stood Victoria Harlow. White blazer, manicured smile, folder in hand like a weapon. She didn't just take a shot at my livestock, she tried to end a bloodline. But this land carries memory. This ranch remembers loyalty. And now it remembers betrayal. She just made this personal. My name is Ethan Blackwood. I'm 28 years old, and this ranch is all I've ever known. 5 generations of Blackwoods have walked this land, planted it, bled on it, buried kin beneath it. My great-great-grandfather brought Highland cattle from Scotland in 1892. Not just animals, living heirlooms. Only 47 left in the entire state. Long russet coats, curved horn's eyes that held storms and stories. Dad used to say they were worth more than gold, not for money, but for meaning. Son, these bulls carry your bloodline more purely than any last name. He told me that just days before the tractor flipped and crushed him. I was 14. Since then, I've protected them. Read agricultural law by lantern light. Learned every loophole, every code, every clause. Because I always knew someday someone would try to take what wasn't theirs. That someday came with a gunshot. 6 months ago, she showed up like a storm in heels. Victoria Harlow, 30, sharp as winter glass. She moved into the newly built Meadowbrook Valley development just 2 miles from my property line. Suburbia, concrete, and noise sprouting like weeds on the edge of my world. She named herself president of the HOA within 2 weeks. I later found out the real president, sweet old Mrs. Henderson, had been declared legally incompetent before she mysteriously passed 3 months in. Victoria was power in lipstick platinum hair, surgically perfect posture voice like a blade hidden in sugar. She smiled like a queen waving to peasants, and I was the peasant next door. At first, it was letters, noise complaints, zoning violations. Then came the threats. And today she brought guns, not to scare me, to erase me. She didn't know this land wasn't just where I lived. It's who I am. I stormed across the field, boots slamming into dew-soaked grass, fists clenched so tight my nails cut skin. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" I roared. The hunters barely glanced up like I was background noise. One even waved, like we were at a damn barbecue. But Victoria, she didn't flinch. White blazer clean as a lie. Heels planted in the mud like she owned it. In her hand a manila folder thick with government seals. "Mr. Blackwood," she purred. "I think you'll find this documentation enlightening." I snatched the folder, scanned fast. My heart dropped faster. It looked official. A state permit to euthanize contaminated livestock. My cattle, my legacy. Stamped, signed, sealed. "You forged this," I said, voice trembling between rage and disbelief. "Oh no," she smiled. "You just didn't read the fine print." She turned. The next bull collapsed. The second bull dropped like a felled tree, a hollow thud shaking through my boots. Blood sprayed the pond's edge, too red, too fast. Scout howled. Not barked howled, like he understood what was being stolen. I stared at the papers. Latin disease names I'd never heard of. Contamination risk. Emergency directive. Bullshit. 3 months ago, these bulls passed inspection with flying colors. I was there. So was the vet. They were healthy, vibrant, strong. Now they were dying. "Step back." Mr. Blackwood, one hunter ordered, leveling his rifle. This is state authorized. I couldn't move. Not because I was scared, but because I was unraveling. Years of sacrifice. Nights buried in law books. Every fence I'd mended, every storm I'd endured for this Victoria watched like it was a play she'd written. And I realized something chilling. This wasn't a mistake. It was an execution. Then, like divine timing, I heard tires crunching gravel, a familiar growl of an engine. Dust curling on the access road. Miguel Torres. His vet truck skidded to a halt beside the fence door flung open before the wheels even stopped. His boots hit the ground running medical bag swinging at his hip. "Ethan, what the hell's going on?" he shouted. Miguel had been my best friend since high school. But more than that, he was the only vet I trusted, the only man who hadn't sold out. He dropped to his knees beside the first fallen bull. His hands were steady eyes scanning fast, precise, furious. After minutes of silent examination, he stood up. "There's no disease here," he growled. "Coat's clean, eyes clear, muscle tone solid. This bull didn't die from sickness." Victoria's lips twitched. Miguel turned to her. "Lady, what exactly are you playing at?" Victoria didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her chin like royalty staring down a rebel. "Dr. Torres," she said coldly, "your expertise is irrelevant. We have authorization from state-level officials, people who actually matter." The way she said independent contractor dripped with disgust, like Miguel was dirt beneath her pumps. Miguel crossed his arms. "And yet, none of them are here to answer for this massacre." Victoria stepped forward, holding out another document. "This is a writ of seizure," she declared, voice sharp enough to slice bone. "Due to unresolved land grant disputes, the county court has ordered you, Mr. Blackwood, to vacate your property within 48 hours. My world tilted. Land dispute impossible. She smiled, venom behind her gloss. "You see, this isn't just about diseased cattle anymore." Miguel's face hardened. I felt it too. That cold certainty. Victoria wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was erasing me. My hands trembled not from fear, but fury barely caged beneath my skin. I stared at the writ. Pages thick with legal jargon, official seals, and signatures. Meant to look invincible. Meant to break me. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd studied enough law in the dead of Montana winters to know this wasn't normal. Miguel leaned over my shoulder, eyes narrowing. This smells wrong. Then I saw it. Just for a second. Victoria's face. The mask slipped. Beneath that icy calm, something flickered panic guilt. It was gone in a blink. But it was enough. Enough to twist my grief into grit. She thought I'd rage, thought I'd fight like a dumb animal, but I knew better. You don't strike back while they're still aiming. You wait, you watch, you document. Victoria believed this was checkmate, but she'd just moved her queen into the trap. That night the wind felt wrong, too quiet, too heavy. Scout paced the porch like he sensed a storm coming. I barely slept, couldn't. Every creak, every rustle outside made my fists clench. Then it happened. A crash, metal on metal, screeching hooves, the unmistakable bark of Scout turning savage. I grabbed my shotgun and tore out the door. 3 figures in black hoodies were already halfway through my equipment shed tools, smashed feed sacks slashed open like guts spilling onto the floor. One swung a pipe at Scout. I didn't think. I moved. A tackle, a punch. Steel in my ribs. I went down hard. Blood in my mouth, but I got back up. They scattered like rats when the porch lights kicked on, but they'd left their message spray-painted across my barn door, "You lost." But they were wrong. That wasn't the end. That was my beginning. I stood there, blood on my shirt, knuckles raw, staring at that barn door. You lost. They wanted me to snap, to fight loud, reckless, to play the dumb rancher role they'd scripted for me. But I wasn't dumb. I was dangerous. While Scout limped beside me, I walked back to the house, every step heavy with clarity. The cameras I'd installed last winter, still running. motion activated, night vision, audio, every punch, every voice, every face recorded. I spent the rest of the night checking hard drives, securing backups, uploading everything to the cloud. Then I dug out a locked box buried in my closet. Inside, legal files, notarized deeds, my father's original land grant, and the emergency plan I never thought I'd need. They'd started a war, but they'd made one mistake. They thought I was prey. They forgot I was raised by wolves. At sunrise, I started calling, not lawyers ranchers. 3 counties over, I found Tom Harrison. Voice like gravel bitterness baked into every word. "Ethan Blackwood," he said. Same song, different verse. His story mirrored mine: rare, cattle surprise, inspection, mystery, disease, forced sale. Then 2 more. Each one eerily identical. Always development land. Always sudden outbreaks. Always Victoria visiting weeks before it began. I mapped them, red pins on a wall, and suddenly it wasn't just my story anymore. It was a pattern. A machine, chewing through legacy like it was trash. And Victoria. She wasn't just HOA royalty. She was a scout. A vulture in pearls circling dying ranches before the kill. They hadn't just targeted me, they'd rehearsed on others, perfected the formula. But this time the formula was broken, because this time they picked the wrong ranch. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Every ranch Victoria touched was connected to the same law firm, Harlow and Briggs. Every inspection came from one man, Dr. Marcus Webb, the so-called livestock specialist with a talent for diagnosing invisible diseases, and a history of disciplinary actions buried in state records. And every piece of land now owned by Sterling Development Corporation, Robert Sterling, Victoria's ex-husband. Billionaire real estate mogul with a vision to turn rural Montana into eco-luxury destinations. They were a machine. Legal fraud forged inspections. Fake community boards bribed county clerks. A land grab operation masked as public health. And Victoria, she wasn't rogue. She was the tip of a corporate spear. Weaponized grief in a business suit. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't personal vengeance anymore. It was a war for the soul of the land. And I was done playing defense. I went back to Victoria's first move, her rise to HOA president. It happened too fast, too clean, too convenient. The paperwork, I got a copy. The signature that appointed her Helen Henderson, the original HOA president. The woman Victoria claimed passed away peacefully just 3 months ago, but court records told a different story. Mrs. Henderson had been declared mentally incompetent 6 months before she died, legally incapable of signing anything, which meant Victoria forged her way into power. That forged signature was the seed. Everything after fake inspections, property seizures, armed intrusions grew from it. She hadn't just bent the system. She'd rewritten the rules in her name. If that one document fell, the whole house of cards came with it. And I now held the match. What she built on, lies I was going to burn down with truth. The knock came just past midnight. Not urgent, not soft, just tired. Sheriff Bobby Chen stood on my porch, hat in hand, eyes sunken with something heavier than sleep. "Ethan," he said quietly, "we need to talk." He stepped inside like the house might judge him. I poured coffee. He didn't touch it. "My wife," he began, voice cracking. "Stage 3, cancer. Victoria. She paid for the treatment." The words landed like gravel in my gut. He pulled out an envelope, thick, yellowed at the corners. Inside, photos, transcripts, audio files. I started recording when I realized what I was part of. Meetings with fake inspectors. Conversations with Victoria planning seizures. Proof. She's got half the county under her thumb. But I couldn't sleep anymore. Not after what they did to your bulls. He looked me dead in the eye. "Help me make this right." And just like that, I wasn't alone. I spread Bobby's files across my kitchen table. Photographs, call transcripts, payment logs. One image hit like a hammer, Victoria mid-handshake with Dr. Marcus Webb, a manila envelope between them. Time-stamped, clear. Another county official, Eugene Ballard, leaving her house at midnight with a check in hand. And the recordings. Her voice. Calm. Calculated. We'll declare them contaminated first, then hit them with the land dispute. Fear makes them sign faster. It was textbook racketeering, interstate fraud, impersonation of government officers, medical tampering, property coercion. She wasn't just running a scam, she was running a criminal enterprise. And now, with Bobby's help, I had federal-grade ammunition. I stared at the tangled web of corruption and saw a path through it. Not with fists, not with fire, with facts, with exposure, with law. Victoria built her empire on shadows. I was going to drag every inch of it into the sun. At noon, the next day, I set up my phone on a fence post, took a deep breath, and hit Go Live. The sun blazed behind me. The pasture stretched wide, and my highland cattle, calm, grazing healthy, moved like living proof. This is what Victoria Harlow wants to destroy, I told the camera. These aren't diseased. These are descendants of American history. I walked through the field, showing clear eyes, clean coats, steady movement. Then I laid it out, forged documents. The fake HOA presidency, Dr. Webb's involvement, Bobby's confession. You want to see corruption, here's what it looks like. And if they can do this to me, they can do it to you. The views climbed hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in support from ranchers, whistleblowers, even journalists. Victoria had tried to make me look like the villain, but she'd underestimated the power of the truth, especially when it goes viral. Less than 24 hours after my live stream went viral, Victoria struck back with flair. A high-production video dropped on YouTube the truth about Blackwood Ranch. It was slick, professional, and completely fake. Footage showed me same build, same shirt, shouting at cattle, jabbing them with electric prods, ignoring open wounds. Starving animals stumbling through dry fields. But those weren't my highlands. They were standard Angus filmed somewhere else entirely. She even hired an anonymous whistleblower claiming I faked my video to dodge accountability. The media pounced. Talk shows debated it. Animal rights groups mobilized. Then the hate started. My phone buzzed nonstop, death threats, boycott campaigns, strangers calling me a monster. But what Victoria didn't realize, she overplayed her hand. Because Miguel watched the video once, scoffed, and said, "Wrong breed, wrong behavior, wrong everything." Her lies were getting louder, but so was the proof. Miguel didn't just watch the video. He dissected it like a forensic surgeon. "See this?" He paused the frame. "These aren't Highland cattle. That's Angus, shorter horns, black coats, entirely different gait." He pointed again. "Those prods wouldn't even work on Highlands. You'd get gored before the second jab. We screen captured every inconsistency. Lighting angles that didn't match my ranch. Fencing I never owned. Equipment I'd never used. Then we did our own video side-by-side comparison. Miguel narrating calmly, clinically, like a professor dismantling a bad thesis. This isn't just deceptive," he ended. "It's fabricated. No credible vet would ever sign off on this. We uploaded it. The reaction was nuclear. Farmers, breeders, vets from all over chimed in. Victoria's narrative cracked like thin ice under truth's weight. And just like that, her polished smear campaign started unraveling thread by thread. She fired the first digital bullet. But we fired back with facts. By now, this wasn't just local corruption, it was a multi-county conspiracy. So I made the call. "Agent Sarah Mitchell." The voice answered. Crisp, no nonsense. "FBI, Denver, Field Office." I laid it all out, fake inspections. Forged documents, HOA Power grabs the fake livestock crisis and Sterling Development's land seizures. I mentioned Bobby Chen's recordings. Victoria's voice giving illegal directives. She didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, there was silence. Then Mr. Blackwood, she said, "You may have just handed us the smoking gun we've been waiting for." Turns out, Sterling Development had been under investigation for environmental racketeering for over a year, but they lacked proof on the ground. Until now. Agent Mitchell asked just one thing: "Are you willing to help us bring them down?" I didn't even hesitate. "Tell me where to stand. I've got cameras. I've got truth. I've got nothing left to lose." Agent Mitchell's plan was simple but lethal. "We need her caught in the act," she said. "Fraud, coercion, impersonating federal authority. All on camera. All airtight." I'd return to my ranch publicly. Loud. Defiant. Victoria would take the bait. She'd escalate. Push harder. Maybe try to finish what she started. Meanwhile, Mitchell's team would infiltrate posing as journalists, activists, contractors, hidden mics, drones, aerial surveillance. "Let her believe she's already won," Mitchell said. "That's when predators expose their throat." I prepped the land like a battlefield. Every camera rechecked. Every file synced to cloud backups. I even wore a wire just in case. Miguel volunteered to stay close, acting like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about every ranch they'd taken, every legacy they'd buried beneath fake signatures and bulldozers. I wasn't just bait. I was the beginning of their end. Victoria arrived like a politician on Coronation Day. White Mercedes, white blazer, white teeth bared in a victory smile. Her entourage spilled from SUVs, lawyers, county officials, surveyors, and men in tailored suits who didn't introduce themselves. They walked my land like it already belonged to them. She didn't even glance at the cameras, didn't see the undercover agents blending in among press and environmental observers. Her voice cut across the field. Mr. Blackwood she called oozing smugness. "Still, trespassing on government-controlled property, I see." I stood at the fence line steady, wired, mic'd, every heartbeat syncing with drone rotors above. "I think we both know who's trespassing Victoria." She approached, folder in hand, again her favorite weapon. "This land will be transformed. Your cattle. A memory." I smiled back calm. "Perfect. Say that again louder." The trap was closing, and the queen just stepped into the center. I pulled a folder from my jacket thinner than hers, but heavier with truth. "Before you break ground on your fantasy casino, I said you might want to explain this." I held up the page. Her face twitched. "Official HOA appointment signed by Helen Henderson." Problem is, Helen was declared legally incompetent 6 months before that date. She couldn't appoint anyone. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in, and this I flipped to the next page. Signed by Dr. Marcus Webb, suspended 2 months prior. No authority to authorize cattle euthanasia, meaning your state orders are worthless. Victoria laughed. Too loud. Too fake. "You're not a lawyer, Ethan." "No," I said. "But the FBI agents currently filming you, they brought a few." Her smile faltered. "You just confessed Victoria. On stolen land. Surrounded by witnesses." For the first time her eyes darted, searching for an exit. There wasn't one. And then, like divine timing again, Sheriff Bobby Chen stepped forward. Not from behind Victoria, from behind me. Uniform pressed, badge gleaming, chin high like he'd finally remembered who he was. Victoria's eyes widened. "Bobby," she said, voice low, icy. "You have no jurisdiction here." He ignored her. "Victoria." "Harlow," Bobby said, voice booming across the field. "You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud impersonation of a public official's destruction of protected livestock and racketeering across state lines." Gasps. Cameras clicked like gunfire. "You were right, Ethan," he said, facing me. "I was weak. I let her buy my silence." He turned back to her. "But not today." Victoria took a step back, still holding her precious folder like a shield. But shields don't work when arrows come from all directions. The agents began closing in, and for the first time since this all began, Victoria Harlow looked afraid. Victoria's smile vanished like fog in sunlight. She backed away, raising her voice to the cameras, trying to salvage control. False accusations. He forged everything. I'm here under legal authority. No one moved. Then her bodyguard stepped forward. Big, black suit, no badge, no name tag. His hand drifted toward his waist. That's when Miguel shouted, "Gun!" Chaos cracked open. People scattered. Agents drew. Bobby stepped between us, hand raised. "Put it down," he barked. The man froze, hesitated, then dropped the weapon and hit the dirt. Victoria turned to run, but Agent Mitchell was already there, her voice calm, precise. "Victoria Harlow, you are under federal arrest." Click. Cold steel around her wrists. Her designer blazer wrinkled. Her hair now windblown and undone. And in that moment, surrounded by lawman cameras and the legacy she tried to erase, Victoria Harlow finally lost control. And everyone saw it. They had her cuffed, cornered, surrounded. But Victoria wasn't done. As agents read her rights, she shouted, voice cracking wild, now no longer regal. "You think I'm evil? You think I wanted this?" She twisted toward the cameras. "My son, Tommy, died on a rural road because there was no hospital for 50 miles. If that rancher had sold his damn land, we'd have had infrastructure. We'd have had help." Silence rippled across the crowd like a dropped stone. I watched him bleed out in my arms. "You think I care about cows? I care about saving lives?" Her voice broke, but her logic didn't land. Because greed dressed as grief is still greed. I stepped forward quiet. "And you thought destroying 5 generations of families would bring him back?" She looked at me, and for just a breath her eyes softened, then hardened again, and the mask returned. Too late. As Victoria was led away, everything unraveled fast. Her phone was seized, her files confiscated. Agents raided the HOA office before sundown. By morning, it was all over the news. $1 billion land seizure scheme exposed. Sterling Development tied to federal fraud ring. Local sheriff turned hero. After whistleblowing on racketeering network. Dr. Marcus Webb arrested. 3 county officials indicted. The law firm backing Victoria raided for falsified contracts and forged deeds. And the best part, every piece of land stolen under this scheme was frozen, including mine. Sterling Development's assets were seized. Their stock crashed. The empire she built on forged signatures and buried legacies. Gone. And as I stood in that same field watching Highland cattle graze beneath morning light, I realized, sometimes justice doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it arrives with the sound of hoofbeats and handcuffs. 3 weeks later, I stepped through the gate of my ranch, my land. The court had returned full ownership. The state issued a formal apology. And the Highland herd safe, unbroken, grazing like they never knew how close we came to vanishing. Miguel was officially hired as herd veterinarian, his name now printed on federal genetic preservation documents. Sheriff Chen cleared of all charges, reinstated, promoted to federal liaison for agricultural integrity. And me, I wasn't just the last Blackwood. I was the beginning of a new chapter. People came, journalists, students, ranchers from across the country, some to learn, some just to see the bulls that survived a corporate war. But I knew why they really came. Because this wasn't just a ranch anymore, it was proof. That truth still matters, that legacies can be saved, that sometimes the good guys do win. And damn, it felt good. What started on my land didn't end here. Agent Mitchell's case against Sterling Development opened doors we didn't even know existed. Ranchers from 4 states came forward, names I'd never heard, stories I could have written myself. Each had faced mysterious diseases, urgent seizures, HOA intimidation, or zoning ambushes. But now they had proof. They had a blueprint. They had hope. Mitchell's office launched a federal task force. Congress called for hearings. Agricultural law schools began teaching our case. The story went viral again, but this time not as a tragedy or scandal or rural sob story. It was a manual for resistance. Reporters asked me what I'd say to others in my shoes. I told them the truth. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And you're not powerless. Because what they tried to bury became the seed of something stronger. Justice didn't just survive here, it spread. One morning, just after sunrise, I stood where my father once did beside the old cedar post he carved when I was 8. His initials faded, but firm, still etched in the wood. I let my hand rest there like I was holding his again. The fields were quiet now. No sirens, no threats, just the sound of hooves and wind and the pulse of a land that had refused to be conquered. Scout lay nearby, his ears twitching at birdsong. Miguel was fixing a gate. Bobby had dropped off homemade pie. Peace at last, but not silence. Because the land remembers. It remembers every lie burned, every truth buried and finally unearthed, every name carved into its dirt in blood or legacy. This ranch isn't just a victory, it's a promise, and I'll guard it until I become part of it, just like he did. This wasn't just a fight for land. It was a fight for legacy, for memory, and for the right to stand your ground when no one else will. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: justice doesn't always arrive in sirens or headlines. Sometimes it comes in quiet courage, in the neighbor who speaks up, in the friend who refuses to be bought, in the truth that refuses to stay buried. No one, no HOA president, no corporation should ever hold the keys to your land, your peace, or your dignity. True power lies in integrity and standing tall when it's easier to bow in knowing who you are, and never letting anyone rewrite that. If that message means something to you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories where justice rises and arrogance falls. Because sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a fist. It's a camera and the truth behind it.